DDT and victim orientation, a perfect match. You see, Ted continued, the dreaded drama triangle is rooted in the victim orientation. Look at the roles and their reactions. Imagine you're the victim in the triangle. Remember, in the DDT, there are only 3 possible reactions: fight, flee, or freeze. The victim may lash out to fight back when faced with a persecutor. When that happens, the victim becomes the persecutor, and the original persecutor now becomes the victim. Or the victim may flee to get away from the persecutor, striking out in search of a rescuer who will welcome the victim with open arms. Or the victim may freeze. The freeze reaction can be to do nothing, but that usually isn't what happens. More often, the victim finds a way to numb out the fear and pain of victimhood. Numbing out can be done in a number of ways, most of them addictive, like drugs or alcohol, working too much, zoning out in front of the television, or anything else that offers escape from feelings. All 3 reactions, fight, flee, or freeze, are reactions to the problem presented by the persecutor. I could see how consistently the DDT and the reactive cycle of the victim orientation had played out in my own life. This has happened to me so many times, I said. Like all my life, I've been afraid other people will leave me. I can think of lots of times when I was a victim of abandonment, both emotionally and physically, and I lost an important relationship. Whenever this happened, I had a flight reaction. Right away, I started looking for another relationship to fill the emptiness. That new relationship became your rescuer, saving you from the pain you felt when you were left alone, Ted responded. Right. This fear of abandonment has given me a kind of super-sensitive radar. I'm constantly looking for signs that the other person is going to leave, or that the good things in my life will be taken away. I start reacting to every possible clue that something is about to go wrong. I hate to say it, but I get clingy. I hold on so tightly and focus so intently on the relationship that other people start feeling smothered or pressured. They then react by getting distant from me. And as that person grows distant, you see her as your persecutor, said Ted. Right? You bet, I exclaimed. She becomes my newest abandoner, my persecutor, and the cycle starts all over again, just like you said. That's what happened between my wife and me. When I found out about my infertility, I wanted more and more reassurance from her, but that only drove her further away. I sure wish I'd known about all this back then. Your story illustrates another important part of the victim orientation, David. Much of humanity is sleepwalking through life, moving through the day firmly rooted in the victim orientation and not being aware of it. It accounts for much of the tragedy of the human experience. Ted turned away a moment and looked out at the approaching waves. He picked up a gnarled stick of driftwood and threw it onto the sand near the waterline. Just then a huge wave arose, submerged the stick, and carried it away. As we watched it bob away on the water's surface, I glanced at Ted. A faraway look was in his eyes. He took a branch and continued, "When sleepwalking, you constantly react to problems, even to your own behaviors. In the victim orientation, you want to get rid of or get away from your problems. But often the things you do to try to make the problem or the persecutor go away just end up intensifying your suffering." Actually, there were times when things seemed to be going okay, I said. I mean, sometimes my wife and I got along great, and we had a kind of peaceful coexistence, even if we weren't all that happy. The victim orientation can be very seductive, said Ted. As long as your reaction, be it fight, flee, or freeze, seems to make the situation better, like that period of a peaceful coexistence, you tell yourself that your reaction is working to get you what you want. In your case, that meant feeling safe and avoiding loneliness. But then, just as you described, at some point you noticed your wife getting distant, and you reacted by pushing for more closeness. Instead of solving the problem, your reaction made it worse, as she began to feel smothered and pressured. So reacting actually increases the problem. When that happens, life quickly becomes a slippery slope. The problem worsens, and your anxiety increases. As the anxiety increases, you act out to reduce your anxiety. That acting out, clinging or begging or shouting in frustration only throws fuel onto the fire. I get it. I get it, I sighed. My own fearful reaction creates the exact result I'm trying so hard to avoid, being abandoned. Exactly, Ted confirmed. Then you go on to the next relationship and play out the same drama, unless or until you wake up to what you're doing. As long as you're sleepwalking, you're unaware of this cycle. While you're playing out the drama, you don't see that what you're doing is counterproductive. Because at first, your reactions seem to be working to keep your anxiety down. Ted looked squarely at me. While sleepwalking, you think your problem is out there to be fixed, not realizing how your own reactions contribute to your suffering. You believe the pain exists out there in your environment, and that if you can just fix that, through fighting, fleeing, or freezing, life will get better. Okay, I said. I get how I keep the cycle going and how my victim stance feeds the drama. But what about someone else? Someone who really is a victim of circumstances beyond his control? Oh yes, war and murder, starvation. While it's true that certain circumstances are not of your own making, it is also true that the way you react to those circumstances, usually by trying to make it all go away, becomes the source of even more suffering and keeps the cycle active. The ocean waves were now growing in size. We watched the tide rolling in, and a wave began to build and grow. The wave crested, breaking toward the shore. It crashed into the sand and wiped away the dreaded drama triangle Ted had drawn. He turned to me. What an apt metaphor. The wave just wiped out the DDT. I wish it was that easy to overcome the limitations of that way of being in the world. But the victim orientation is ancient. It has been humanity's primary orientation for as long as we have roamed the earth. The urge to fight, flee, or freeze has played an important survival role, a vital evolutionary force. The tough reality is that the victim orientation and its mischievous dynamics will always be a part of you. But the victim orientation has outgrown its usefulness, David. It doesn't have to drive your life and relationships anymore. I searched Ted's eyes for clues. How could he be so certain? So are you saying that I don't have to react to trouble? It seemed unlikely. That's right, he said. There is another orientation that presents a different choice, one that can only be made consciously. That next evolutionary leap will take you to a very different orientation. But we will talk about that later. The waves were growing in intensity. Little by little, the beach seemed to be shrinking. My mind was reeling from all that Ted had told me. He smiled. Perhaps the rest can wait. Can you come back tomorrow? Yes, I answered. I'm taking some time off right now. I had planned on spending a few days out here anyway. I'd like to hear more. When could we get together? How about meeting at the bench up there on the bluff around mid-morning? Whenever you want to show up is fine by me. I will see you in the morning then, I said.